Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Mr. K. I'm here with Mississippi Public Broadcasting, and I have another great lesson on biology for y'all. So we're going to start off with a little bit of review, and then some questions, and then we'll hop into some new stuff, okay? So let's go ahead and review the cell theory, okay? What does the cell theory tell us? Well, it tells us that all living things are made up of one or more cells. And hopefully we remember that an organism that's only one cell large is known as a unicellular organism. Okay, what else does the cell theory tell us? Well, it tells us that the cell is the basic unit of life. What that means is that when it comes to if something is alive or not, you can't get any smaller than a cell. The cell is the smallest unit of life. Okay, and what's the last part of the cell theory tell us? It tells us that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. So that's a little bit of review on the cell theory for y'all. Let's see what else we got reviewing today. Okay, so these are some questions actually I need y'all's help answering. We talked about these last time. These are cell features, and what that means is that any type of cell that you're talking about, any cell in your body, any cell that makes up any other type of organism, always has a couple things in common. And I want to see if we can remember what those different cell features are called. So the first one I wanted to talk about was an organelle. This is an organelle that makes proteins, and they make proteins for use by the organism. Does anyone remember what that organelle is called? That's right, it's called a ribosome. Okay, ribosomes are in cells and they make proteins. Proteins are very important because your body is totally made out of proteins. Okay, the second cell feature is the fluid material within the cell. Remember, we don't want the cell to deflate like a balloon, so we fill it with this jelly-like substance. What's that jelly-like substance called? Does anyone remember? It's called the cytoplasm, that's right. You'll see that prefix cyto a lot, C-Y-T-O, that means cell. So if you ever see that, you're talking about a cell some type of way. Okay, the next thing that all cells have in common is that they're always going to have some type of genetic material. What's the genetic material that we find inside of all cells? That's right, it's called DNA. DNA is the genetic material that is in every type of cell that you can imagine. Okay, what's that thing called that gives the cell its internal framework? What is that called? It's called the cytoskeleton. There's that prefix again, cyto, C-Y-T-O means cell. So this is the skeleton within the cell. And then the last one, this is the last cell feature, every cell has this, it's the outer boundary. It lets some things into the cell, but not everything. What's that called? It's called the cell membrane, that's right. So these are 5 things that all cells have in common, okay? So on this next slide, I actually have a little game for us to play. So here's how it works. I'm going to put some true or false questions on the board, and I'm going to divide the class into teams. Okay, girls are going to be team true, and boys are going to be team false. So when I show you the answer, when I show you the question, if you think the answer is true, I want all the girls to yell out true. If I show you a question and you think the answer is false, I want all the boys to yell out false. And let's see who can get more of these right. Okay, here's your first question. Robert Hooke was the first person to see cells. Girls, I hope y'all are getting loud because this one is true. Remember, Robert Hooke took a look, and what did he see? He saw cells. Okay, here's another one. Bacteria cells have a cell membrane. Girls, I hope I heard from y'all because this one is true again. Remember that all cells have a cell membrane, including bacteria. Okay, here's another one. The cell theory was developed by a single scientist. What do y'all think? Boys, now it's your turn because that one was definitely false. It was not just one scientist, it was a lot of scientists working together to figure out the cell theory. Okay, here's another one. Plant cells have cytoplasm. What do y'all think? Girls, that one was all y'all because this one is true. Remember that all cells have cytoplasm, even plant cells. Here's another one. Cells taken from fungi do not have DNA. What do y'all think? Boys, this one was y'all because this one is false. Even fungal cells would have DNA. Remember, all cells have DNA in their cells. Okay? How about this one? Cells can only come from pre-existing cells. This one is true. Girls, I hope y'all got that one. All right, y'all, I got one more for y'all, so I hope you're ready. Here it is. It only took 5 years to develop the cell theory. What do y'all think? Boys, this one was all y'all because this one is false. It wasn't 5 years, it was a lot longer than that. All right, y'all, thanks so much for following along. I think that wraps up the review, so we're gonna go ahead and start hopping in to some new stuff, okay? So I wanted to talk about cells in a little bit more detail. We're gonna break them into two main divisions of cells. When it comes to cells, all cells can be divided into one of these two categories. Cells can either be prokaryotic or they can be eukaryotic, okay? And that's all the options. So as far as cell goes, every organism is going to fall into one of these two cell types. I did want to take a second and talk about these different words that we're seeing up here. So cells can be prokaryotic or eukaryotic, but organisms can be either prokaryotes or eukaryotes. So that's how you use those words. If you're talking about a cell specifically, you use these, prokaryotic, eukaryotic. If you're talking about an organism as a whole, you would be using these words, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So we're going to talk about how these are different from one another and how they're similar. But one thing I really just want to go ahead and get out of the way so we remember is that you are a eukaryote, okay? That's something that'll help you remember that. My biology teacher told me that like 15 years ago, and I never forgot it. You are a eukaryote, okay? Let's go ahead and talk about how these are different and similar to one another, okay? We're going to break these words down a little bit. So one thing that they have in common, both prokaryotes and eukaryotes have this root word, karo, in it, K-A-R-Y-O. What does that mean? Karo means kernel. What it's really talking about is a nucleus. But when you look at these cells under a microscope, sometimes they look like they have a little seed or a little corn kernel in them. What you're looking at when you see that is the actual nucleus. So karo means nucleus, okay? The difference in between these words is the prefixes. So pro is a prefix that means before, and EU means true. So what's going on here is that prokaryotes are older. Remember, pro means before. So prokaryotes are older than the nucleus. They were around before the nucleus kind of evolved. Eu means true. So eukaryotes have a true kernel. What it is really talking about is a true nucleus. So eukaryotes have a nucleus and prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. Okay? Let's talk about prokaryotes in a little bit more detail. So y'all remember that pro means no, and that'll help you remember that prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. Okay? Something else about prokaryotes is that they lack membrane-bound organelles. Now they have ribosomes and they have cytoplasm, but they're not going to have any of the other organelles that we're going to talk about later in this unit, okay? So prokaryotes, no nucleus, no membrane-bound organelles. Something else about prokaryotes, I find this kind of easy to remember. The only example of prokaryotes is bacteria. So if someone asks you, is a plant or an animal or is a fungus or any of those prokaryotes, they're not. There's only one type of prokaryotes, and that's bacteria. If it's not bacteria, it's not a prokaryote, okay? And the last thing, prokaryotes are very simple and they're very small. They are a very early form of a cell before they got really complicated. So prokaryotes are small and they're simple. They don't have all this other cellular machinery that the eukaryotes, that our cells tend to have, okay? I have a couple pictures I wanted to show you. So let's take a look at some of these pictures about the prokaryotes. So the first thing I wanted to draw your attention to is look at those pictures on the right. Those are all different types of bacteria, okay? So bacteria cells do not always look alike. They can have different shapes. Some of them look spirally, some of them are long and skinny, some of them are circular. Those are all types of bacteria cells, and they don't always look alike. Okay, look at that picture on the left for me. I want to direct your attention to the little tail-looking thing coming out of the bottom, okay? That's called a flagellum. Some bacteria cells will have a flagellum. This tail is actually used for movement. What they'll do is they'll move it around. People say it's a whip-like structure. So they'll whip their flagella around, and that helps move the bacteria cell around a little bit, okay? Something else to take note of is looking there in the middle, that blue, you see how there's a lot of little blue lines? That's actually the DNA inside of a bacteria cell. It's just kind of out there and it's open and exposed. That's not how our DNA is going to look. Okay? All right, y'all, so just an overview of those prokaryotic cells, some really important stuff to remember. They are very small and they are very simple. The only example of prokaryotic cells are bacteria. If it's not bacteria, it's not a prokaryote. Something else really important about bacteria cells, prokaryotic cells, is that they do not have a nucleus. Now, you can see their DNA there, but it's not inside of a nucleus, and that's different from how eukaryotes are. For prokaryotic cells, their DNA is circular and it just kind of floats out there in the middle of the cell. For eukaryotes, we protect our DNA inside of a nucleus, and that makes it a lot harder to get to. Now, there is one benefit of having your DNA floating in the cytoplasm. These bacteria cells can reproduce a lot faster than our cells reproduce. They do a certain type of division called binary fission. And what they'll do is, imagine taking a ball of Play-Doh and just pinching it and then pulling it apart. That's kind of how bacteria cells divide. They do this thing called binary fission. Remember, bi means two, like a bicycle has two wheels. So in binary fission, they split into two new bacteria cells. So that's one benefit of having their DNA like this. They can reproduce faster, but the DNA is not protected like our cells are. Okay? So that's some information about prokaryotes. Now I wanted to give you more information about eukaryotes. Okay? So here's some information about eukaryotes. Remember, you are a eukaryote. So I'm talking about the cells inside of your body right now. Eukaryotic cells can be found inside of plants, animals, protists, which are kind of like small animals, and then fungi. Okay? So eukaryotic cells are everything else other than bacteria. Okay? In eukaryotic cells, there are four main parts, and we've already talked about a couple of these. So eukaryotic cells have a cell membrane. The cell membrane, you see the dark black outline of this picture? This would be the cell membrane. The cell membrane is the boundary. It's the outer portion of the cell. Okay? Eukaryotic cells also have cytoplasm. So remember, this cell is filled up with a jelly-like fluid, and we call that cytoplasm. It kind of helps keep the cell inflated. Okay? Something else that eukaryotic cells that prokaryotic cells do not have is a nucleus. Nuclei, or a nucleus, is usually in the middle of the cell. So you see that big circle there towards the top, this one? This is a nucleus, and this is where eukaryotic cells hold their DNA. It's protected inside of the nucleus. It doesn't come out, and that helps to keep it safe. Something else that these eukaryotic cells have that prokaryotic cells don't have is that we have organelles. Remember, organelles are little organs, and they each have their own specific job. You may have heard of a couple of them. Types of organelles are a nucleus, mitochondria, the endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes. Those are all organelles. Eukaryotic cells have organelles, and prokaryotic cells don't. The only one they have is a ribosome, but they don't have any of the other organelles that we're going to talk about. Okay, so let's talk about that nucleus in a little bit more detail. Remember, this is the big difference in between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Remember, it's right in the name. That word kero means kernel or nucleus. So the whole division is, does the cell have a nucleus or does it not have a nucleus? If it does have a nucleus, this is kind of what a nucleus looks like, then it's a eukaryotic cell, and you are a eukaryote. Okay? So the nucleus is usually in the middle of the cell. It's also going to be the easiest thing to see if you are looking at it under a microscope. It tends to stain the best, which means it kind of stands out compared to some of the other organelles. Okay? Inside of the nucleus, there's something really, really important. This is all the directions for your cells, and it's called DNA. But DNA can be in one of two forms. Okay? If I asked you what DNA looks like, a lot of times people will just say it looks like an X, and that's called a chromosome, but that's not actually what DNA looks like the majority of the time. The majority of the time, DNA is in a form called chromatin, and what I want you to imagine for chromatin is a big bowl of spaghetti. That's kind of what chromatin is. Most of the time, DNA is in this really long, stretched out form, kind of like spaghetti noodles, and it gets all tangled up like the noodles in a bowl of spaghetti does. But when we're getting ready to divide the cell, We take that chromatin and we wound it really tightly, kind of like when you're using the fork to get a bite of the spaghetti. So we take that DNA, we wind it up really tight, and we make something called a chromosome. That's what most people kind of think of DNA is, but it's only like that a little bit. The majority of the time, it's in that long stretched out form called chromatin, okay? And then in the very middle of the nucleus, this whole thing is the nucleus, but right there in the middle, you'll see that kind of dark circle. That's called the nucleolus, and that's where the ribosomes are made. And it's really important because ribosomes make proteins, and the majority of your body is made out of protein, okay? So I've got some more true or false questions, and I wanted to play that game with y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed that. So we're going to divide the room into two teams. Girls, y'all are team true. Boys, y'all are team false. I'm going to ask y'all some questions about prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Y'all take a second to think about it, but then I want you to yell out when you think you know what the answer is. If the answer is true, let's get the girls yelling out true. And if the answer is false, let's get the boys yelling out false. Okay, are y'all ready? Let's see what I got. Number one, all cells have a nucleus. What do y'all think? Boys, I hope y'all yelled out because this one is definitely false. Not all cells have a nucleus. All eukaryotic cells have a nucleus, but remember there's a whole division of cells. Prokaryotic cells, pro means no nucleus, okay? Here's another one. Number two, all cells have a cell membrane. What do y'all think? Take a second to think about that. Girls, this is y'all's turn because this is true. All cells have a membrane, a cell membrane. Prokaryotic, eukaryotic, bacteria, animal cells, they all have a cell membrane. Okay, here's the next one. Eukaryotic cells are the only cells to have a flagellum. Take a second to think about that. The flagellum is that tail whip-like structure. Okay, this one is false because bacteria cells can have a flagellum. We looked at that earlier. Some eukaryotic cells have a flagellum. There's only one example in humans, though, and that's the spermatozoa. So eukaryotic cells can have a flagellum. Bacteria cells, prokaryotic cells can have a flagellum. Okay, I got another one. The nucleus contains the cell's DNA. What do y'all think? Okay, 4 is true. So girls, I hope y'all yelled that out. The nucleus is where the DNA can be found inside of eukaryotic cells. All right, let's do this one. Chromatin will become chromosomes. Chromatin will become chromosomes. This one is true. Remember, chromatin is what the DNA looks like most of the time. It's the spaghetti noodles. But when we're getting ready to divide, it's going to wind up, and this is kind of what chromosomes look like over here, the little axes. Okay, but it's only like that a little bit of the time. Okay, here's another one. The nucleolus makes the cell's DNA. What do y'all think? Boys, this one was all y'all because this is false. The nucleolus makes the cell's ribosomes. The DNA is already there. So this one is false. Okay, great. So teacher, what I would like for y'all to do is if you could take these, hopefully you have them printed off already, go ahead and give each student one of these Venn diagrams. Why don't you pause the video, take 5 or 10 minutes and see what y'all can come up with, and then when you're ready to review it, I'll go ahead and talk about it up here in the video. So when y'all are ready to review it, just unpause the video and we'll see what everybody came up with. All right, y'all try your best to follow along. My board, I can't write as much stuff on here as you can on the paper, so I'll do maybe 5 to 10 of them, and then I'll have to erase and do the other half of them. So make sure you're keeping up as we go over this, okay? So we'll just start on the left and then do a column and kind of go that way. So the first thing says smaller. Which of these two cells are smaller? Hopefully you have this under the prokaryotic cells. They are much smaller than the eukaryotic cells. Remember, they are simple and they are small. Okay, the next bullet point says no membrane-bound organelles. Which one does not have membrane-bound organelles? Well, remember, pro means no, and so prokaryotic cells do not have membrane-bound organelles. No, I'm going to abbreviate membrane-bound as MB, no membrane-bound organelles. Great. Okay, Here's the next one. Reproduces by binary fission. Where should we put that one? This is going to be in the prokaryotic. I'm going to abbreviate binary fission as BF, binary fission. An easy way to remember this might be that we know the only type of prokaryotic cell is bacteria. How they reproduce is called binary fission. Binary and bacteria both start with the letter B, so that might kind of be an easy way to remember this. Okay, the next bullet point says it undergoes mitosis and meiosis to make new cells. All right, mitosis and meiosis, we're going to write this under eukaryotic. We didn't really talk about this, but where bacteria cells and prokaryotic cells do binary fission, our cells reproduce through these methods, and we'll talk about this later on in the year. Okay, so the next one says ribosomes present. Which of these cells have ribosomes? This one's actually going to go in the middle. Both of these have ribosomes. Remember, ribosomes make proteins. Proteins are very important. They're so important that prokaryotic cells need them and eukaryotic cells need them, so they go in the middle. All right, the next one is has cytoplasm. Which of these cells is going to have cytoplasm? They both have it. That's right. So I'm going to put cytoplasm in the middle. Anyone remember what that prefix cyto means? Means cell, right? These are both cells. Okay, has a plasma membrane. Where is that one going to go? Plasma membrane goes in the middle. So we've got 3 in a row, all in the middle. Great job. All right, let's keep it going. We have evolutionarily the older type of cell. Which one of these are older? You might remember that pro actually means before, and so this is the older of the two. So I'm just going to put older type right here. Prokaryotic cells was some of the first forms of life on the planet. Okay, I'll do a couple more, but I'm going to have to erase it here in just a second. Okay, the next one is multicellular. Which of these two can be multicellular? Prokaryotic cells are always unicellular, and the eukaryotic cells can be multicellular. We are multicellular. All right, here's the last one before I erase it. Has linear DNA in a nucleus. Well, the key word here is what? The key word here is nucleus, right? If we see nucleus, that tells us which cell it is. So we know that the eukaryotic cell is going to be the one with a nucleus. So DNA and a nucleus. All right, go ahead and pause the video if you need to for a second. Make sure everyone has those first 9 or 10. But I'm going to go ahead and erase them here so I can get everything else on. All right. Thanks for hanging in there with me, y'all. Let's knock this thing out. So, we just did DNA in a nucleus. Which of these two has a membrane-bound organelle? Well, this is going to be the eukaryotic cell. So I'm going to abbreviate that as MB organelles. They have membrane-bound organelles. Which of these two are the larger cell? That's the eukaryotic. Okay, the next bullet point says bacterial cells. Which of these two are bacterial cells? Well, remember that the only example of prokaryotic cells are bacteria. So we're going to put that in the prokaryotic. Bacterial cells. All right. How about plants and animals? Which one should plants and animals go into? Well, the only example of prokaryotic cells are bacteria cells, so these must both be eukaryotic. So I'm going to put plants and animals. All right, just a couple more. Which of these two has DNA? This one goes in the middle. They both have DNA. Great. Okay, which of these two has a nucleoid, which is a condensed circular DNA? Well, eukaryotic cells' DNA is in the nucleus, and the bacteria cells have the nucleoid. So let's put that over here. All right, just a couple more. Can have a cell wall. Which of these two can have a cell wall? I'm not sure if we've really mentioned it yet, but we'll talk more about it next time. They can actually both have a cell wall. So we'll put cell wall here in the middle. And then the last one, unicellular. Which of these are going to be unicellular? This one actually goes in the middle. They can both be unicellular. All right, y'all, thank you so much for following along with me today. I hope you learned something. I'm super excited about the stuff that we've been talking about. Your teacher has some other assignments that you can practice on, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope y'all have a great day.